topic 3. Vince, since we have you, you're known for one thing in particular, and that thing is fighting games. Fighting games are really interesting to me because a couple weeks back we did a topic that was what are the 5 games that kind of, best describe what video games are.
Sure.
And I was kind of coming at it from the viewpoint that like you kind of got to think of the genres and like what genres represent video games.
Sure.
And I believe fighting games have to be represented. Like that is just, there's something core about fighting games that is video games include a fighting game. Every launch lineup for a console needs a fighting game. This is just a thing, right? Having said that, I don't particularly love fighting games. I don't, I'm not great at them. I don't really look forward to them coming out. You love them.
Yes, I do.
I want to talk to you about the history of fighting games and kind of the evolution and what are the franchises that matter and how do they stay relevant?
The franchises that matter over the course of history. It's funny because some of the games that matter the most, I think, never became franchises. Some of
Justice League Task Force fighting game, Sega Genesis. You're telling me, brother.
Eternal Champions. The formative. It's funny because the formative years of fighting games, really, it's like Karate Champ and Yaya Kung Fu, and most people don't know those games, haven't played them. They were not, those did not become franchises. It's funny because people, it's always like the Doom Wolfenstein dichotomy where people are like, yeah, Doom is responsible for first person shooters. And it's like, not really, so when people are like, well, Street Fighter is responsible for fighting games. I'm like, not strictly speaking true. There were iterations of that before. And I would even say that, I'll say this, the original Street Fighter, and I'm a Street Fighter guy, that's kind of like my core, my core fundamentals come from Street Fighter. The original Street Fighter, I don't think is any more seminal for the genre than Yaya Kung Fu is. To me, where Street Fighter becomes a historically relevant and important franchise is 2. Because not only for fighting games, but for video games in general, Street Fighter 2 does or evolves it creates ideas and evolves existing ones that have a reach beyond just fighting games. So like, for instance, like there weren't a whole lot of games in arcades in like 89 when Street Fighter 2 comes along. There just aren't a whole lot of video games in general where you can select a character. Like for the most part, player 2 is using the same person as player 1, just with a different outfit or something. And a lot of games aren't even, some games aren't even multiplayer at all. But like the idea of here is an actual cast of characters, 8 distinct tool sets. Look by comparison, like the easy comparison is something like Super Mario Brothers, right? Like player 1 uses Mario, player 2 uses Luigi. They're the same exact thing. They're the literal same exact thing. So to this point, games are about one tool set that you learn intimately, and the tool set's usually pretty basic, involving like 2 buttons at that point, maybe 3, and they're like, no, we're gonna take that, we're gonna give you 6 buttons, and then we're gonna say, by taking those buttons and then having them do different things in different contexts. Am I jumping forward? Am I jumping straight up? Am I close to my opponent? Am I far from my opponent? Am I crouching when I press this button? And then also adding the complexity of if I press this button plus a direction or plus a series of directions, which was a concept that did exist in the original Street Fighter, but only in a very limited capacity. So this idea of these intricate, complex input systems, Street Fighter 2 is not just relevant to fighting games; it's relevant to video games. Like video games just don't do that very much, but at least not at that point. That was like an unheard of thing. Mm-hmm. Like you think about the difference between Gunstar Heroes. I know you play Gunstar Heroes. Okay, cool. So Gunstar Heroes, what's one of the main differences between Gunstar Heroes and Contra? In Contra, you can literally only move, jump, and shoot, right? Move, jump, and shoot. In Gunstar Heroes, you can do a half circle forward with an attack button to do a slide attack. You can press forward with attack when you're close to an opponent to throw them, to pick them up and throw them. These are mechanics. This idea of adding these nuanced kind of directional inputs along with buttons that work differently in different contexts. That's that's Street Fighter. Like Street Fighter is the popularization of that concept. So yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of
No, I mean this is exactly what
This
I
is
wanted.
this is what he wanted.
Yeah. So what about health bars? What was the game that originated that kind of idea?
oh god. Well, health bars go back well prior to are you talking about in the fighting game genre or in video games in general?
Fighting games.
So Karate Champ doesn't have the which I would call Karate Champ the original fighting game. It's people debate about that a little bit maybe, but I Karate Champ is where I kind of draw the line and say, okay, fighting games are born. And if I remember correctly, I was very young when Karate Champ came out, and I played it a little bit in arcades. But I don't think there was an actual health bar in there. It was more like a karate style, karate tournament style, where like you score points, But yeah, I mean, health bar that starts with Yayar Kung Fu. Yayar Kung Fu had health bars, and Yayar Kung Fu predates the original Street Fighter in arcades by I think a year. I think the original Street Fighter is 85, and I believe Yayar Kung Fu is 84. I'm pulling up that off the top of my head. So yeah, health bar has been around, almost from the beginning. But how does a franchise stay relevant? You want to know what's funny is that the way a franchise stays relevant, ironically, I think, is something that I care about a lot less than a lot of other fighting game fans or a lot of other people who love fighting games is characters. It's characters like the when you have a compelling design that's got a memorable silhouette and an easily identified like archetype, like Ryu he's Karate Man. Like that's all he is. Like that's all he is. He's Karate Man, but like it's so prototypical Karate Man, with his headband and the white gi, and the black belt. You know what I mean? It's so iconic. It's instantly iconic, and people that becomes an anchor. I feel like Ken and Ryu are an anchor for that franchise. That at every point in the game's history, people who had stopped playing since the last numbered entry, they see Ken and Ryu, and instantly they're like, "Oh yeah, this is what I remember. This is what I know." And I think that's what keeps it relevant over a long period of time. And the reason I say that's something I care less about is like I don't get. People think this is crazy. Like, oh, you don't love Street Fighter then. I'm like, I'm not attached to Ken and Ryu. I'm not the way they look, like who they are, their story, what they do. They are a toolbox to me. That's all they are. That's what they are. They're just a toolbox. And in terms of Street Fighter, they're the most basic elemental toolbox. I haven't used them in a regularly in a Street Fighter in maybe not ever. Honestly, maybe in Street Fighter 2 I played Ryu, and since then I've branched out. I play other characters. I don't really care about that anymore because it's about the toolbox to me. But the thing that I can't lie, I want to look at other fighting games too, like Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat it continues to be popular on the back of, besides obviously violence, which people like, but people are always like, what word association? You can't say like blood or gore or whatever. Like word association. What's a phrase that you associate with Mortal Kombat?
Fatality.
Okay.
Finish him.
Okay.
Sub-Zero.
Get over here.
Get over here. Get over here. Scorpion and Sub-Zero are, they emerge as kind of these polar opposite, almost literally mascots in the same way that Ken and Ryu are, and people, and so people every time they play a new Mortal Kombat, every time they see new Mortal Kombat, as long as it's there, they grab onto it, and that's the reason why other franchises that I think are equally deserving haven't caught on as much, because their character designs are actually more nuanced and complex in some ways than Ken and Ryu are.
Interesting.
Like Arc System, like I said once in a review of. I don't know if I said this in a review for Guilty Gear Plus R when it came out on Vita a couple years ago, and I said in a review, if there had been any justice, the second family, the second duo after Ken and Ryu would have been Soul and Kai from Guilty Gear. To me, they're just more interesting characters than Scorpion and Sub-Zero. They're visually more evocative. They have more interesting tool sets to use. But an iconic, easily identifiable character that people just understand immediately once they see them, what they do and what they represent in terms of story and character. people really graphed onto that. And like, that's why Street Fighter 3, for instance, kind of had some problems. Because yeah, it had Ken and Ryu, didn't have Chun-Li until Third Strike. And that was the third rendition of Street Fighter 3. And then they had a whole cast of, as far as other people are concerned, just strangers. They see guys like 12. He's like this weird alien who like morphs into like different shapes. They see Q. He's like a private investigator robot dude. They're like, nope, this ain't Honda. It's not Dalsum. I don't care. You know, and so Street Fighter 3 was loved in the competitive community, but like I remember the day like Street Fighter died in my like arcade was when like, you know, Street Fighter 2 was this game that was always surrounded by people, and then Street Fighter 3 came out, and I tried to get people to play it, and like everyone was like, no, where's Guile? Where's Blanca? I don't know who these people are, and they're not I can't easily and instantly put them in a box that I understand. So I can't emotionally connect to it.
We've talked about this in the past. I love picking your brain about fighting games, and that's one of the things I always respected about you is as a critic and stuff. You understand fighting games, and I like fighting games. I like to play them, but I'm not very good at them, and I don't know them like you do. Why isn't Arc System Works bigger? Because it seems like on a technical level, like Arc System Works games are like actually way better than even Capcom's games. Nonetheless, you know, this like Mortal Kombat to me like was always like. Even like when I played Mortal Kombat back in the day, I'm like, this game kind of like sucks. Like compared to Street Fighter
and Reptile.
It's hard for me to hold my tongue when these things come up because like, so if there was justice in the world, you know, Guilty Gear, which is Arc System Works, you know, Blaze Blue, Persona 4 Arena, even I love Persona 4 Arena. Like these games would be the biggest deal. So yeah, why haven't they taken off? I think kind of what I'm talking about is part of it is when you look at even like the equivalent of Ken and Ryu or Scorpion and Sub-Zero for Arc Systems Works would be Soul and Kai. And like when you look at them, they're not mirrors of one another necessarily visually in terms of their tool sets. They don't have as much of an analogous tool set as Ken and Ryu do. It doesn't immediately create that idea of a rivalry in people's heads. Like Ken and Ryu and Scorpion and Sub-Zero, as much as I don't necessarily think they're interesting to play as some other characters in either of those games, there's a built-in story. Like for Ken and Ryu, it's the clash between discipline and self-expression. You know, like Ryu is this on the path. I have a mission. I have a duty to make myself as strong as I can be. And Ken is just like, whatever, bro. I'm just going to throw a bunch of kicks and have a good time and be wild. And like that dichotomy is very easy for people to graft onto emotionally and conceptually. So that stays with people. Soul and Kai.
And Dan.
And then there's Dan, right? The weird friend who tries too hard, you know, and never quite gets there, but you root for him. And you know, Soul and Kai just don't visually immediately tell that story. They're both way more interesting to look at from a design standpoint. I don't feel like it's not even a discussion that they're way more interesting to look at and more interesting to try to master.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask is that these games just seem mechanically way deeper, and that might be why they're not as like. And I'm not saying that Street Fighter isn't deep.
No, neither am I. I love Street Fighter. I love tremendous depth.
My heart's with Capcom in terms of fighting games, in terms of the games I play. But it just seems like these games are beautiful. Like the animation and art is through the roof.
The music is awesome.
The music's
Guilty Gear.
Oh my God!
And the movesets seem to be really complex as well. So I think is that maybe something to do with it too? Like it's just not friendly to play.
So I think that was the case a little bit with Guilty Gear in the sense that Guilty Gear is probably, I might be hanging myself a little bit here, but it's almost inarguable that it's probably the most mechanically complex and deep 2D fighter ever made. I would say that the franchise as a whole has a whole bunch of systems and things that no other fighting game was doing at the time, and that a lot of people who played it even avidly didn't really understand or know about. But I think Persona 4 Arena has done a better job of communicating that depth to people. But I think the communication of depth is the problem, in that not so much in that like the Arc System Works games are overwhelming to play. Because I think if you pick up Persona 4 Arena and you do the same kind of like mashing that you do in Street Fighter, if you don't know how to play, you probably have even a better time. You probably see more cool stuff, actually, because that's the way the game is designed, to try to let you get your feet wet a little bit more easily than some of the other games in the series or in the genre. But I think the bigger problem is this. I think fighting games suffer from the same, and Arc System Works as a result of this, suffer from the same problem that MOBAs and MMOs have, in that people who want to play them have found the one they like. They've found the one they like. They know why they like it. It serves their purpose. Like in Dota, in MOBAs, it's Dota or League. Like there have been other great MOBAs that, you know, Heroes of New Earth was a legitimately very good game. You know, like Demigod was a legitimately very good game.
Infinite Crisis
was not a bad game either, man. Like absolutely not. Infinite Crisis wasn't bad. Smite is a very good game. You know, these are all good MOBAs. They're not anywhere close to Dota and League, and not because they're necessarily so much worse as games, but it's because people only need one of those. Once you find a game with that much mechanical depth to it, like you're kind of like, I don't need to learn. It's like learning a language. It's like, you know what? I want to learn another language. That will be rewarding and interesting and useful to me. So you choose one. You learn Japanese. Like I have spent years studying Japanese. I know Japanese. Cool. Well, here's some other cool languages. Yeah, those languages look cool. But like I just spent years learning, getting and good at Japanese. Like I don't really need. I got my language learning fix, my exotic language learning fix from Japanese. I don't need these other ones. They're fine. And I think fighting games have the same thing. People who love fighting games and want to get into them mechanically in any kind of deep way, I think the really top level people who are just, they love learning systems. They play everything because they just want to. Every new system of rules is a new puzzle to solve, and I'm like that. I love all kinds of different fighting games because I want to learn all those puzzles. But I think for anyone who's not thinking of it that way, they think to themselves, fighting games are a lot of work, and I need to learn a lot of things. And so once I've learned the core fundamentals to be decent at Street Fighter, I'm good. I don't need to go and start from scratch in a new language.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people didn't latch on. That's why Arc Systems Works games, as spectacular as they are, have not caught on more, because they're two languages that came first that kind of the mainstream got their hooks into, and now people, when faced with something completely unfamiliar or a language they kind of know already, and this is just MKX is just a new dialect of Mortal Kombat that people are already kind of familiar with, right? So you got the choice between a different dialect and a language you know already, or having to start from scratch and learn a new language. People are gonna pick something they have a base in already.
Yeah, for sure. I think on a mainstream level, you saw Street Fighter 2 and everyone played that, and then Street Fighter 4 came back and everyone's playing that. But in the middle, there was Street Fighter 3 that, from an outsider's point of view, is a little bit more akin to a Guilty Gear type game in the sense that it's different. It's still the same language or whatever, but it's a step away from what they expected. There wasn't the characters and all that stuff. During that time, there was also the kind of 3D fighter, the rise of that with Tekken and Virtua Fighter and all that stuff. What do you feel about those games?
So, I'm going to admit this here. I don't have exclusive. Kind of funny exclusive. No, I don't want to say that I have a bias against 3D fighters, because that would make it sound like I actively hate them and dislike them, or I don't want to give them a shake. But I remember the first time. So when polygons were literally a newfangled thing, just like brand new, like Virtua Racing is in arcades and it's blowing people's brains to little itty bitty pieces because they can't believe what they're seeing. One of the first times I saw no line at a Street Fighter 2 cabinet was when my local arcade got Virtua Fighter. And I took one look at it, and you have to understand, in the early days of polygon, of 3D visuals, everything just looked like shit. It was just like
I felt like it looked like shit even then. Like, it was impressive, but I remember looking at this being like,
I looked at it, I said, what is the artistic merit of
you put in your monocle, lit your pipe.
I'm like, what is visually interesting to you about a conglomeration of gray squares? Like, what is it visually about this that you find it? I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I'm like, how could this be interesting to you? You're fighting in the same plane. with a little bit of lateral movement. Granted, so that's a novel idea, right? There's lateral movement that exists, but I was like, visually, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen. And I remember as a young man being kind of angry about it. Like there wasn't any, no one wanted to play Street Fighter anymore. And I'm sitting over there like, Mr. Lonely Pants at the Street Fighter cabinet. And like, there's all this line of like people, they got their friends, their family, they're all having a good time.
Grandma's there in a walker cheering Billy
dogs, on. There's, their hamburgers and they're like their pizza, their bad arcade pizza. This is great, and I'm like sad.
You're playing 12.
Right, exactly right. Yeah. So I remember that, and so from that point on, there was always this mindset in my head like those are a different people's. Mm-hmm. Those aren't my people. But now I know that's not true, right? Except 3D fighters, a completely different set of core competencies from 2D ones, and I think where 3D fighters started. They first gained their foothold on the novelty of, look, you can move mostly to a limited degree on it. It's always funny to me that they call them 3D fighters because they are still mostly 80% played like this.
Sidestep to spin the world around, always have it.
Like, the number, there are few 3D fighters
Power Stone.
Like Power Stone, right, exactly, where you're actually like moving, you're using the entire plane. For the most part, it's like a quick sidestep that gets you out of the way of something. It's not, 3D in the sense that you're maneuvering a 3D space. It's still mostly 2D, so it's a funny abstraction. But the core competencies are actually, despite the fact that they look structurally similar, are so different. Like what we would call footsies in 2D fighting games, in like Street Fighter, where you're using these different, your best ranged pokes to kind of out-inch your opponent. That's like one facet of how 2D games are played, but that's almost literally what 3D fighters are. It's literally a dance. If you watch Tekken, if you watch high-level Tekken players, and they've learned how to Korean backstep, it's a kind of a weird mobility technique that you learn with the stick. You'll see them jockeying and moving in these really frantic kind of jarring looking ways, and you're like, what are they doing? And they're literally trying to occupy a space where they know their opponent has a move that they think will reach from there because they want them to throw it out so that when they throw it out and they make a subtle move backwards and that misses, they can then counter with their own move that does work at that range. There's literally millimeters of space being jockeyed for and judged visually to make these things happen. And that's kind of what typifies 3D fighters in a way that to me that's the main difference between 3D and 2D, is that 3D is very squarely about that game of inches, where 2D is about that's a foundation. That's a big part of what we call the neutral, like the neutral game, like when you're not on offense or defense, it's the part in between. Like that typifies some of the neutral of fighting games, of 2D fighting games. But then there's things like, there's projectiles, which are largely not a part of 3D fighting games. And then you've got things like, so Okizeme, which is like the game that happens the part of the game that happens once you knock someone down. 3D fighters have always had a very, very rich Okizeme game. Like people standing up in Tekken or in Virtua Fighter have all these options. They can roll this way, they can roll that way, they can get up with this kind of attack or that kind of attack. In 2D fighting games, there's still Okizeme, but it's a little bit more constrained. Hey, does your character have a dragon punch or something like that to wake up with? If yes, then you can throw it randomly. If no, well, get up and block. Whereas universally in Tekken or Soul Calibur or Virtua Fighter, there's just a universal set of like 10 things that someone can do when they stand up. So then as the aggressor, I knock someone down, I have to think about all these different permutations and how to follow up effectively on that. So it's really, 3D fighting games look similar, but they're I want to say they're a completely different language, but they're definitely occupying a totally different space in terms of the skill set and the mindset in order to play them, in my opinion. So they kind of appeal naturally to, I think, a very different group of people.
Yeah.
Are we running later? Because I just want to.
We are running late.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
No. I want to just ask where SNK kind of sits with everything now with King of Fighters 14 and stuff, because I just feel like back when I was young at the ground round on Long Island, playing Neo Geo machines, playing World Heroes, and
As you did.
Samurai Showdown, and like whatever we were playing.
Sam Show 2. I love Sam Show 2.
I just felt like they waned so hard in like they were so like that seems so cutting edge even compared to Street Fighter, and they were contemporaneous and even obviously beyond that and kind of in that space between that and like Mortal Kombat kind of coming out in my mind. I don't know if the dates actually match up, but like what happened to them? Like I just thought like they're around and they're making games, but I just don't know like why.
So the quick version, because I know we're over time and I'm sorry. The quick version is
You monster.
is that King of Fighters in the modern sense. So King of Fighters has mostly a proud core in South America. That is South America's game. Like South America will fuck America up in King of Fighters all day, every day. And we are in what was a few years ago the King of Fighters 13 capital of North America, San Francisco, Northern California. Like this is where like we built the King of Fighters 13 scene, North American scene. And I'm very good friends with a lot of those players, and they will tell you every time the South American players came up, it was free. That shit was free. So, but 12, it's funny, KOF 12 was like the first big bid in the current modern time to get King of Fighters back on the map. And it was terrible. It was so bad. And then King of Fighters 13 was kind of like apology edition. It was like, let's make up for all the bad things that happened. But it's funny because when 12 comes along, the fighting game's second renaissance hasn't really kicked in yet. They had a chance with 12 to get in around the same time when Street Fighter 4 comes out and revitalizes everything. But by the time King of Fighters 13 comes around, Capcom has its hooks back in the public again, and there's too many other horses in the race. And I think that's why King of Fighters kind of fell a little bit by the wayside. But don't sleep on King of Fighters 13. 13 had some great showings at EVO that really showed America and the world how good King of Fighters is, and it's incredible. King of Fighters 13 was a beautiful game. Unfortunately, so far King of Fighters 14, it's like it looks like there's an even game curse now with King of Fighters, where 14 is looking pretty rough. We're hoping it doesn't turn out like 12 did, but yeah. It's very sad to say. I think King of Fighters 13 was a beautiful game, but I don't know if King of Fighters 14 is going to be the one that lets that franchise break through all the Capcom noise.
Okay, before we move on to the next topic, we're talking Twitter, 140 character or less answers to these. Roberto Cordova wants to know, how do you know if a fighting game's good or great?
How quickly it gets people playing one another instead of playing each other's characters. Like, if I could clarify, even like the sooner we get from Ryu versus Ken to Vince versus Tim, the better a fighting game is, in my opinion.
Ooh, that's a great ass answer. Bass Patterson says, what's your favorite fighting game of all time?
Street Fighter Alpha 2.
Scott Rabadou says, thoughts on Street Fighter 5 as a platform versus incremental full releases?
Super smart. Ensures no fragmentation of the player base and makes it so that theoretically, if I'm grinding enough online, I don't ever have to pay another dime for another version of Street Fighter.
Final question. Paul Apology wants to know, have you finally decided to main someone in Street Fighter 5?
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah, it's Rashido. It's Rashid. Yeah, Rashid is my man.
Rashid's the dude.
Rashido.
I'm really just happy.
The theme is too hype. You can't mess with that theme.
All right.
It's good.
Please write a book on fighting games.
Wait, before we go, topic 3 brought to you by Harry's. Guys, everybody knows good things come in sets of 3s. That's why this is a sponsor of the third topic. What does that have to do with anything? Well, get this. March is the third month of the year. It also happens to be our friends over at Harry's 3-year anniversary as a business. And if you're new to Harry's, I got a special deal for you to try 3 of their expertly crafted 5-blade German razors, a handle, and shave cream for just $10 with the offer code Kind of Funny Games, or offer code KFG. Why pay $32 for an $8 pack of blades when you can get them for half the price at harrys.com? I got the best shave I've had in a long time recently. I've been growing out the beard for a while. But just for this GDC, you see this? Is that nice, clean Harry's goodness? Harry's blades are super sharp and provide a close, comfortable shave. The Harry's starter blades are great. Hold on, I'm lost in my thing. Harry's doesn't like to discount because their prices are already really low, but we worked out a special offer for you guys. Harry's will give you $5 off your first order with promo code KFG, so stop overpaying for a great shave. Go to harrys.com right now. That's HARRYS.com and enter code KFG at checkout for your $5 off.